welcome to another companion piece of the Ashland's Field of Dreams documentary. Today, Dave, we are talking about three who did make it. Brandon Webb, a pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks, and Major League umpires Charlie Reliford and Greg Gibson.
And of course, with Brandon Webb, you watched his career envelop at Central Park as he was a kid, as you were writing for the paper.
Exactly. I followed Brandon Webb since he was a little leaguer, playing on the 22nd Street Diamond, which is right next to CP1. And Brandon was a terrific little leaguer, as you can imagine. He was a terrific high school player, and just a great person. And he always remembers Ashland. He remembers where he's from, and I think that's important. And I think you talk about Charlie Reliford, the umpiring peers there call him Mr. Ashland. So if you don't think he thinks a lot about Ashland, then you got another thing coming.
I first met Charlie when he was like a kid in college. He worked at the Y, and he came by my office one day, and I saw the spirit that he had, and I just saw his love of the game. And it's so cool now to remember him coming by my office when he was a youngster, and to watch games now with number 18 umpiring behind the plate and think, I knew him back when.
Yeah, Charlie, interesting thing about Charlie, too, is that he actually started on the softball fields umpiring. Greg Gibson, actually I ended up coaching him in basketball at Rose Hill, and Greg's just another great person, and let's hear from them. Brandon, growing up in Ashland and Central Park being kind of the place that everybody played baseball at, what are some of your early recollections of Central Park and baseball down there?
Well, that was the very first time that I stepped on the field. I played started off T-ball there and played there, and then I played minor league ball. I played all of my little league and minor league and T-ball there, right on 22nd Street, and then moved to Waterworks. I think my last year of little league, and then back over to the Big Diamond on 22nd Street for high school and summer ball. And so, almost all the memories that I have of baseball are right there at that corner.
Yeah, in the corner of the park there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Some of the people that were major influences for you in your life as far as baseball goes, obviously I know your parents, your father was, and some of the others maybe too.
Yeah, my dad was always my coach through Little League. Always helped me out. We'd go out in the yard and toss or hit socks, wrap sock balls up and hit them against the garage or something like that. My coaches that I had, I thought were great back then. I mean, they really helped me, and Marv Childers was one of them, and Steve Moore. They were hardcore coaches that we were out there every day, and not every team did that back then. It was kind of a.
You're talking Little League here.
Talking Little League, yeah. I was 9 through 12, and we were out there every day. They threw the hardest BP to us, hit the hardest ground ball. So when we were out there, we were ready for anything. So my Little League coaches were a big help for me, I thought.
Were there people you looked up to watching play in the park, when you were young?
I mean, yeah, I totally remember, going over there and with my dad and watching like high school games and stuff, and always Juan Thomas was always one of the big guys and big names that had come out of this area and did some stuff in baseball and football. So I always remember him out, and I'm pretty sure he played right field, and I'm not positive, and I always heard some stories about him and how far he was hitting home runs and things like that. So.
Did Dad tell you some stories about some of the? He probably pitched in Central Park as well when he played in high school.
He always talking about. We actually went down and met Don Gollett again. I've met him a few times, but him, hooking horns with I think Don Gollett a few times and stuff. So it's pretty neat because he's experienced the same things and pitched in the same areas that I did. So it's neat to do that.
A lot of history down there.
A lot of history.
When you're at a major league stadium and you're looking around at everything, does Ashland ever come into your mind?
Definitely whenever I'm at Cincinnati, whenever I get the fans that come up from Ashland, I can remember a lot of them being down there at the park and rooting me on then, whether it be some teammates or some of my teammates' parents that still go up to Cincinnati. I'll be down there and I'll see them on the fence or somewhere out there, and they were down there cheering for me then when I was 12 years old, 13 years old, and still doing it here in the big league. So it's neat to see those people out there and support me.
We were talking about high school a little bit, and what are some of your favorite memories of high school and games that maybe you played in the park or be it pitching or even hitting maybe?
Yeah, I don't have too many hitting ones that would be any of any interest. I don't think. I was never a real great hitter, but I always remember pitching. Big games was Boyd County. Just going head to head with them, and I don't for sure know this, but I've heard that I don't think I would ever lost to them. So, being down there and locking horns with, they had some great teams too, and some good pitchers that, I kind of know real well still, but, going head to head with them were always good games and always big games and important games and, just right down there in 22nd Diamond.
The people, you probably run into people at every park you go to, every major league park, maybe somebody hollering at you from the stands, and it seems like Ashland's everywhere.
It is. It's and I've seen it down here just signing. Throughout all the stadiums and anywhere you go, there's always a family member, or I used to live there, or hey, you play with my son in Little League, or my son went to UK, or it's always something comes back to Ashland, how they have family members around the country and say, hey, they saw you here. So it's definitely a small world. It seems like people say it all the time, but it really is. Whenever it constantly people are telling you that they saw you here, or they know you from this, and it's it's definitely cool to hear the stories that these people tell.
You go to Central Park, not really a stadium, not really it's kind of different. It's not like at Boyd County, they got the big stadium.
Right.
Even Ashland now has their. What was kind of neat about Central Park to you?
Well, I like the setting of it, just being kind of a public park, but being, in there with all the trees and stuff. It's in the background of the houses and the background was neat. It's not a typical setting that you would think for a baseball field, like you said. Some of them have the nice stadiums and things, and I just like the natural look of the trees, and then the old and the if you call it nostalgia or whatever that place brings, because it was it wasn't the best stadium, but it was the most fun to play at.
Is it a good pitcher's park, or?
Man, I never even thought about that back then. I was just trying to strike everybody out back then. There wasn't a whole lot of home run hitters in high school anyway, so I wasn't really worried about the long ball too much. There was obviously a couple guys that could maybe once that won a team that could hit a home run or whatever. But I was just trying to strike people out back then. It was a little bit different game for me.
Talk about some of your other coaches, like French Harmon in the Connie Mack and Mickey Mantle. And stuff.
Yeah, I had. French Harmon was definitely, I think, a big influence on me. He really pushed me real hard, and back then, I was like, I come back from practice or something, and I'm like, yeah, Dad, French is really on me today and stuff, and I from now on, looking back, it's I'm glad that he did it, because it really pushed me. If he wouldn't have done that, I would have probably I would have been lazy, and he did it because he saw potential in me. And I really appreciate. I told him that, I think, whenever I saw him a few weeks ago, and thanked him for it, because he was a big influence on my baseball career for sure.
Mike Martino, your high school coach.
Yeah, Mike Martino, my high school coach, kind of the same thing. Would always get on me, but these people saw something that I didn't see, I guess, and really pushed me hard and helped me progress through and get better.
Probably played against some pretty good people with the Connie Mack, and I know they traveled around a lot, and maybe even brought some of those teams to Central Park.
We did, yeah. I remember bringing I'm pretty sure the Cincinnati Storm. That was one of the big clubs in summer ball that were a powerhouse in baseball. So we would bring them here. There, Cincinnati Midland was another one. They had 2 or 3 teams, different ages, and bringing those people in. So there was always some big names on there that end up playing some college ball, and even I think a couple got drafted too. So there's been some names that play down there.
I guess that's the park's kind of a field of dreams for you as well. Had that been?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a lot of memories down there, and I think I remember somebody telling me. King Griffey Jr. had come through there and had played there, and how far he hit this home run, and they were all. And I was telling you the houses that were in the background over there in left field and center field, you know, where this ball landed and things like that, and we would always point out to where he hit this ball at. So, I totally keep remembering that, and where King Griffey Jr. hit this so-called home run at Central Park. Some of the best moments of you know, playing on the CP1 field probably incorporated the big backstop that was behind home plate. It was at least 45, 50 feet back there, and no doubt if there was anybody on third base, I was a big-time curveball, threw a lot of curveballs in high school and stuff, and that was my big out pitch. So inevitably, I would never want to throw a curveball in high school and let that ball get away from the catcher, and then he would for sure score. And then even worse, there were holes that the ball could scoot up under, even go past the backstop. There was a little gap in the rubber the way he could even scoot up past into the trees back in the background. So, you know, it was definitely one of the things you didn't want to do. If people were on base, you had to keep it up out of the dirt, or at least have a good catcher, because they were definitely going to get at least one base. And I've seen them to where they've gone from first to third on one pitch because of that backstop.
Talk about some of the distractions down there, the animals that crawl across.
Yeah, there's always you know, you have to keep your focus, because there's enormous amount of squirrels. You know, the population of squirrels there in the park are you know, probably the highest in any place you've ever seen. It's unbelievable. I mean, they're everywhere. People are feeding them, so they stick around. So you got to keep your focus, and they'll be jumping on the screen back in the background, so you can kind of see them in the behind the catcher. So it was one of the things for sure to remember.
From a fan's perspective, can you talk about the park a little bit as far as watching the game down there? I know you probably were a participant more than somebody watching, but.
Yeah, it was a great place to watch a game, and then I think in right field, right behind you know, first base and behind the dugouts, a great place to put lawn chairs and stuff. All the family members, they wanted lawn chairs or lay out a blanket or something. Great place to watch it from there. And then also the stands were good. There wasn't a whole lot, but so a lot of the family members seemed to, you know, congregate around behind the dugout. And then the real nice concession stands and stuff like that. I remember working those and raising money during some of the other games, cooking up cheese sticks and serving the ice lemonade and stuff like that. So those were good memories.
Making those long trips to the water fountains too.
Definitely, because they were back behind in the bathrooms. Yes.
Probably, especially like Little League and some of the Babe Ruth.
Oh yeah.
The water.
Yeah. Well, now they got it right on the corner, don't they? The water fountain right on the corner behind the backstop of the Little League.
Yeah, they've made a few improvements.
Few improvements since I've been there. Yeah, it's been many years.
Greg, can you talk about some of the special influences in your life growing up? I'm talking about, you know, your parents, obviously, coaches, teachers, people like that, and talk about the influence they had on you.
Well, obviously, my mom and dad would be the top two. You know, my dad pastored here in Ashland, and you know, I joke and tease about being a preacher's kid was a good prerequisite to being an umpire, because you know, when you're a preacher's kid, if you run down the center aisle at church, you know, everyone looks at you. And it's like, whoa, look at that. You know, as an umpire, everybody looks at you. If you make a mistake as an umpire, you know, you couldn't make a mistake as a preacher's kid. And, you know, you make a mistake as a preacher's kid, it's looked down on. And you make a mistake as an umpire, it's looked down on. You're expected to start perfect and get better. So that's probably one of the best prerequisites I could have had for this job. The other influences on my life, you know, one of the things about baseball, there was two guys here in Ashland that I played Little League baseball for. Was Frank Rowland and Fred Fields. And the funny thing about that team is Steve Rowland played on that team. Steve played some minor league baseball. And a lot of us on that team, we weren't great athletes or great stars, but they taught us the fundamentals. And we won everything there was to win in the Ashland American Little League for 2 years. I never played on a losing team. Obviously Steve was very good, but he was the one of us that was heads and Steve was heads and tails above us all. But the rest of us were decent baseball players. We just learned how to play. They taught us how to play the game. They taught us the fundamentals, and it was, that was a lot of fun.
Did you play on the 22nd Street Diamond?
I played on 22nd Street Diamond for the Twins, National American Little League. We had a lot of fun. That was.
Talk a little bit about that field, even that field on the corner.
Well, I remember fouling a ball off and busting the windshield out of a Corvette. And the guy, I can't think of the guy's name, but he ended up being a city commissioner here in Ashland. But I remember busting the windshield on a Corvette, and he was so mad. But that, it was a lot of fun growing up and playing ball right there.
The park kind of became a home for you as far as when you were little like that. Obviously, you probably watched some games.
Well,
there.
That plus one of the things that I remember was post '76 always had that big Legion tournament, and that was, I look forward to going down every year. 4th of July, they played. I remember sitting there many a night till midnight, 1 o'clock with Dad, me and my brother Barry and my dad, and we'd sit there and watch baseball. Because they had like Twitty City and the teams out of Cincinnati and Indianapolis, and even looking back, I was 10, 11, 12. I remember those teams and watching. That was a big highlight to Ashland, that tournament coming to town.
The park and Babe Ruth. I guess you played Babe Ruth. Did you play some Babe Ruth?
Here's what's funny about that. I fell in love with basketball. I stopped playing baseball when I was 12. I didn't play Babe Ruth baseball. And this is what is so amazing how I got into this job. I never played baseball at a high level. Basketball was what, I ended up going to high school at Rose Hill Christian School. And baseball was what I loved to watch. I still was a big fan of baseball all through high school. I remember going to Reds games all the time, but basketball was what I loved to play. And basketball probably was what I was better at because I could run a little bit. But I didn't play Babe Ruth ball. When I tell that story to a lot of the guys I've worked with, they're like, "You mean you didn't play high school?" And I said, "No, I didn't." So I remember one of the first times I ever walked on the field there, someone said, "Well, there comes little Charlie." We kind of, when we put our uniforms on, it's funny to this day because we do favor each other. It was always, and I remember Fred Collins and Bill Heberlin and Chad Hobbs, they would laugh and joke and say, "Here comes little Charlie." And just working at that field, those guys, Fred Collins was a guy that had a lot of influence on my umpire career, getting me to tell me, "Hey, you need to go do this." So being supportive and saying, "Charlie made it, let's go see what you can do." My first bag of equipment Charlie gave me, and I remember putting stuff on the card and thinking, well, this was Charlie's stuff, and just umpiring games on those fields. Babe Ruth, I worked a ton of Babe Ruth games one year.
Greg, when you were at a major league stadium and here you are at the top of your profession, and do you ever have moments when you think back to when you were a kid in Ashland and what all this means and how Ashland kind of helped form those the roots you have?
No doubt. One of the things that I've always done that stands out in my mind as a memory is a full moon over a field. I don't think there's anything prettier. I can think back to the minor leagues to a full moon over Sarasota, a full moon over trying to think. Just Scranton, the way the moon comes up over a field. You'd be working and you see the big full moon. It may sound strange or funny or corny, but to think about that big full moon in Ashland and how when it was hazy here in the summertime, you'd see that orange kind of tint to it. This kind of things that you remember about Ashland growing up. Just little tiny things that you remember. The acorns that would fall. You'd have to watch running out on a ball in the outfield, or you wouldn't turn your ankle. Those little acorns everywhere.
Did you call some high school games?
Very few. I think I worked 3. I know I worked the Tomcats and Raceland. I worked. They were all like looking at me and walked on the field. I was 21, And everyone was like, who is this kid? You know, here's the Tomcats and the Raceland. That was a pretty good rivalry. Coach Vanderhoof, I don't remember who was coaching Ashland at the time. But I was with Chad Hobbs, a local guy that umpired around here a lot, and them all saying, what's this kid doing? And all the parents kind of looking, because I mean, you know, I looked young, and some of the players were bigger than me, and you know, I walked out there and acted like it was nothing, just fresh out of umpire school. So
obviously, Charlie, big influence on your life.
Huge.
Other umpires from here. You mentioned Fred.
Fred Collins, Fred. You know, Fred would call me, and I wanted, you know, to get as much experience as I could. I wanted to work. And I remember Fred calling me and actually I got picked by the coaches at the Babe Ruth to work the regional all-stars here in Ashland one year. And I remember getting the phone call and how thrilled I was. You know, one of the first times I remember getting a phone call, being thrilled about, you know, getting an umpire assignment that you got picked for. You know, you go out and do the job, and you want to do your best, but it feels good when you're picked and you're rewarded because you do stand out. You know, that's, you know, I've been fortunate enough. I've gotten 7 phone calls. I've worked 6 postseasons. Cameron was born in '02, and I turned that assignment back in. But you know, I've worked 5 divisional series and 1 NLCS, and it's a really, when you get that phone call, that makes you feel really good. And I remember the first phone call I ever had was for Ashland Babe Ruth from Fred Collins.
Discover your promise, your talents, your abilities, yourself at Ohio University Southern in Ironton and Proctorville, with associate and bachelor degree programs that prepare you for your future. Ohio University Southern.
Who were some of the people growing up that you really looked up to and were the people you consider the major influences in your life?
As far as baseball players or umpires?
Just generally.
Okay. Well, you know what, Mark? When I was a kid, I can remember all the Lynch boys being such big athletes for Ashland. And, you know, you'd go see Bobby Lynch or Billy Lynch pitch a game for Ashland, and then you go back over to the Little League Diamond and try to be Bobby or Billy Lynch or John Mullins, or those names that were such big Tomcat stars, because I wanted to grow up and be a Tomcat player.
Do you remember your first time umpiring in Central Park?
Yeah, I actually do. My very first game was a Little League game at the American Little League Diamond down by the church. And I actually had to go to Ashland Sporting Goods before I went to the park to get some of the pieces of equipment that I just didn't have. You know, you sign up to work games, and it's pretty much, well, show up and you're there, and you look back on those days and say, oh my gosh, how did I ever do that? And then, of course, from that diamond, I jumped to the men's softball league, and that's probably the prep for any umpire ground. So, but yeah, I remember it vividly. I was about 17 years old. My boss at the Y, I was a lifeguard at the Y, kept encouraging me to do men's softball. And I was a little scared because I was only 17 and all the men were men.
Right.
So I thought if I got a couple Little League games under my belt, the men's softball games would go a little better.
So what was worse, men's softball or Little League?
Little League moms, no doubt.
As far as when you moved over to CP1, as they call it, the Big Diamond, like you said, you remember a lot of games being played there when you were younger and probably being at the park.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit, just watching those games? And
yeah, it's funny. I can remember I was a 7-year-old and I went to Little League tryouts in the park, and of course you're assigned to the minor leagues, and then when I was 11 I went to the Phillies and got my Philly uniform that I wouldn't take off for a week. and Milt Wagner was our manager, and so we were in National League on the other end of the park. And those were big moments. But when I was a kid, it was just okay to ride your bicycle from where I lived out by Hager down to the park and just spend every day of the summer, ride my bike down, play all day long. Most of it wasn't organized. We only practiced once or twice a week. But I can remember going over to the Babe Ruth games and the diamond looking so big and just having fun chasing the foul balls and returning them, and occasionally you got a Coke or something from the concession stand because you returned the foul balls. And those are still precious memories to me, that every day was about baseball in the park.
When you're at a major league stadium now, and now you're at the top of your profession, and do you ever have moments when you think back to when you were a kid in Ashland and what that means now being where you are now compared to being here? And
without a doubt. I mean, probably as much as anybody. I mean, the hours I spent in the park working there for the Y, but just the training ground of the million mistakes I made on that big diamond for Ashland, for the Babe Ruth leagues, and then for Ashland High School and all the high schools that came to CP1, and the post-76 games, and what an honor it was to work the post-76 tournament. Some of the most valuable lessons I learned were mistakes made on that diamond so that I didn't repeat them in a venue where you get a lot of attention.
But would you say without Central Park, you wouldn't be where you are
Oh,
today?
without a doubt. I mean, umpiring is really an unusual thing. From the outside looking in, you'd think, why would anybody want to do that? But from somebody who did it and say, wow, I really like this, you have to have a ground where you're trained, because there's not a whole lot of places to be trained as an umpire. And in our local area, we really lucked out. We had Bobby Coons, we had Dale Griffith, we had Clyde Chin, people that knew how to umpire. And you didn't really realize how good those people were until you went to umpire school and were having the instructors come up to you and say, "You've been to umpire school before? Who taught you how to do this?" They taught you things that were well beyond the amateur level. But you couldn't appreciate that until somebody else told you who taught you how to do that. But when you were 12, going to 13, walking out on that field, you just felt like it was Yankee Stadium. This is where the Tomcats played. This is where Post 76 played. I want to be one of those people. And I can remember when I was a 13-year-old playing for Ashland Oil, Mark Chatfield just walked up with the picture of when we won the 15-year-old championship. But just being on CP1 you were in the big leagues if you were on CP1.
Dave, as you can see, these three men have quite a reputation for doing things the right way, and they all came up through Central Park.
I think that's the common bond that they have, and they all have a love for Central Park as well.
A love for CP1 and a love for baseball, and you can't hardly get any better than that.